this. And I think we're cool. I just have to check one thing in a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, I just love Terry Walters. And I've known Terry now for how many years, Terry?
I've been trying to think, I think
When did the
since
book?
2009. So what's that, 13 years,
Yeah,
almost 14 years?
that's when you're the first.
That's when Clean Food came out. Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Uh, I people always say time flies when you're having fun. Time flies whether you're having fun or not.
I was just going to say that.
People. It's funny. I get more analytical about some things that people that we say that we all say, and
Mhm.
that's one of them. Time flies when you're having fun. Well, it flies regardless. Maybe when you're not having fun, maybe it
Then
doesn't
it,
fly quite as
yeah,
fast.
it doesn't feel
It
like it
drags.
does,
Yeah, it
but
drags.
it is.
Yeah, it drags more. And I love what you do and who you are. So a little bit about yourself, your background, if you would.
Oh, wow. Let's see. I've been a Louis fan for now. um, it's so interesting to me because the reason that I started writing cookbooks, it hasn't changed. And everyone thinks they expect from my cookbooks recipes. And I have, this book has 200 plant-based, gluten-free recipes. And I don't ever repeat recipes in my book. But really, the reason that I write books and that I teach cooking classes is to help me and everyone around me stay on the journey. And I think that is um, that's really what I want to get out there is it's impossible to create change on our own. It's impossible to live our best lives and be our best selves on our own. It takes a village and we aren't made perfectly and we all have struggles and to do the best you can isn't easy. And so that's what I try and do with my books. I started writing um, because I was trying to heal myself and regulate high cholesterol and heart disease that was hereditary in my family. And I was eating these foods that everybody kind of, back in 2000 to 2007, everyone thought I was kind of crazy. And now is our commonplace. And I'd love to think that I had a hand in making that kind of diet commonplace.
I know you've got a tremendous impact on
And I
people.
think, when the first book came out, Clean Food, it was really about um, empowering people to eat these super nutritional foods. And I know that you're totally plant-based and my books are too, but like to me, these are the foods we all need more of. And if you're someone like I think I've mentioned before, my daughter is allergic to legumes. So she has to have some animal protein. So I think like there's a time and place for everything. Um, and so much about diet and nutrition is up to the individual. We make those reasons for so many different reasons, make those choices. But my goal is always to empower people to make the best choice for themselves. And Clean Food was about eating a rainbow of color and all of the tastes. And nothing has changed in that regard. My books are still organized by season. So, when you eat what grows around you, we maintain balance with our environment. And but the more we know, like our food system is not transparent, as you know. And
That's
so the
for sure.
more we know, the healthier the choices we can make. And you can't make a healthy choice unless you know you're making a choice in the first place.
That's a really good point. When people, again, back in the day, back in those early days, again, there was people that just didn't know, didn't understand. And when you talk about the recipes and the things in the plants and eating the variety of plants and clean food, because you started that,
Mhm.
the clean food revolution. And now it's so much people understand better and
Mhm.
get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there will always be something we don't know. There will, when
Sure.
I look back at the foods that were in Clean Food and in Clean Start and the recipes that I was making, they're really quite different than what I'm cooking with now. The ingredients have changed. What we need to know has changed. And so that like my process of writing the recipes, and as you know, there's so much more information in this book, is sometimes just a reminder to myself, or just information and knowledge that I don't have. Last year at the holidays, this time, my daughter gave me a pressure cooker. And I'm embarrassed to say that, as a chef, for 22 years, I've never had a pressure cooker. And so, but I was so thrilled because it was an area that I really wanted to dive into. And, there are lectins in legumes and in grains, and they can be inflammatory, and they're destroyed when the legume or grain is cooked at high heat. So pressure cooking destroys those inflammatory lectins.
Wow.
And so, not everybody has a pressure cooker, but like in this book, it was really important for me to say, okay, like there's one little chart. It is literally a quarter of the page that gives all the times and liquid quantities to cook all the grains and all legumes. And I thought to myself, like, that is the smallest little quarter of a page, and it is so packed with information. And it took so long to make, testing and testing and testing all the times. But like, that's the kind of thing that I want readers to know, that they can cook in a pressure cooker. They can soak their grains and legumes. They can rinse them. They can cook them with kombu. These are all things that make foods healthier. What I see more than anything now is people who are paralyzed to eat, by the paralysis by analysis, right?
Tell me about
They're
that.
afraid to eat everything because, yes, they're anti-nutrients in so many different foods. But the idea is not to avoid those foods. The goal is to understand how to prepare them. So to bring out the good qualities, the nutritional qualities, and neutralize or even eliminate the anti-nutrients. And that's what I'm trying to do here.
And like you say about some people with different allergies or whatever, and we think back at some of the, again, the access to and you developing the recipes. There's so many places I want to go, but certainly I want to talk about your new book, Nourish: Plant-Based Recipes to Feed Body, Mind, and Soul, which I and for listeners, you're holding up the book, and I've got the book also right next to me. The development of recipes. Can you tell me? Yeah, it's beautiful. It is a beautiful book. You've really you developed the way of knowing how a cookbook should be made. Correct?
Well, I self-published this time around, and so that was like my I tell people all the time, there's intention in every ingredient and in every process, but now there's intention throughout every piece of this book, right? The binding so that it lays flat on the counter and you're not, dirty hands trying to look at the pages. We printed at a veteran-owned print shop in Massachusetts, not China. Like, there's just, it's near and dear to my heart.
And those things are important, and I get it that a lot of people don't care or choose not to care, and I would understand maybe a new author wouldn't see that. I mean, again, I'm an obsessive reader. I'm curious where they're printed sometimes, and I had a book the other day. It's in India, printed in India. I was just like, wow. And you see that, and the different ways that they can be done. Like you say, you self-published and you were able to find a veteran-owned printing, etc., and design it, and really, really design it, as opposed to, in fairness, a publisher making those choices for you.
Yeah. Well, I just, it's all from my heart. And so it was really,
I know that. Forgive me for interrupting. I know it's all from your heart. And I know you've got an amazing heart. I know that personally, and I know that professionally, Terry Walters. And that's the beauty of what you do. I've just got to get back. Creating the recipes, I'm just blown away. Again, I love to cook. You know that. I love to create stuff that I like, that probably no one else would. My guess is maybe there's one or two people in the world that might say, oh, that's okay. Yet you create these recipes which just blow me away. I'll be in process and say, I got to put more of that or more hot, whatever, this pepper or more garlic. You actually create it from, what do I want to say, ground up, from first ingredient up.
It's funny because sometimes I'm not 100% sure where they come from. People have asked me all the time, like, do you watch food TV? I don't watch food TV. Food's like my work and my passion. And if I were to indulge in all of that, I think it would be too much. But sometimes my inspiration comes from going to a farm or what's growing in my garden. Sometimes it comes from a craving, you know, or I might go out to eat and be like, oh, this is really great. And people are like, oh, do you order it if it's not plant-based? And like, if it sounds really interesting, sometimes I do, because I just want to see what I want to go for, what I want to try and create at home, if it's a new taste. Um, and sometimes, like, there's a recipe you love, the pak dong, that's in the fermentation section in this book.
I love your pak dong. And may I say, I was honored to be able to, or should I not say, you shared
You can
the
say,
recipe
you can
with me prior to, and I was able to make, and I love it. I go ahead because I want my other comment on the pak dong in a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like recipes like that, I literally was at a farmer's market and I had never even
Yeah,
heard of pak
yeah,
dong, and probably everybody who's listening is like, what is she talking about? And but it was this company that sold fermented foods, and pak dong is a traditional fermented, I'll call it like a Thai sauerkraut, right? Like every culture has their own special fermented foods. In German cultures, it would be sauerkraut, right? In Russia, it might be beet kvass. In Korea, it's kimchi,
yeah.
um, right? And in Thailand, it's pak dong, and it's like kimchi, but it, instead of using that gochugaru, that Korean smoky red pepper, it's sweet and sour with sesame, and it's so yummy. And it is so important to get these fermented foods, because they feed our good gut bacteria. Well, I shouldn't say that. They are the good gut bacteria, and the prebiotic foods feed the gut bacteria. So all of that is, your immune support, your ability to digest and absorb nutrients, and even mental health.
And what we've learned over the years is the importance of that. And I'm reading more and more and more about the microbiome, the importance of it. I've had Scott Anderson, who wrote, I think, the microbiome, I don't know, revolution or something. He's an incredible writer, science writer, and talking about that again years ago. And I remember talking with him, Terry Walters, about stevia,
Mm-hmm.
because I decided a few years back that I was going to eliminate as much sugar from my diet as I reasonably could, as
Mm-hmm.
much as I could, no added sugar, etc., or minimal. My grams, how many grams was acceptable, etc. And I remember initially trying stevia, and I used it, although it didn't. I was getting like an aftertaste. Although it was fine. I pushed through it, and then it was like I didn't get it anymore. And I wasn't, it tasted, it was sugar. It was just, I wasn't getting that aftertaste anymore in the
Mm-hmm.
early stuff. And I know they have great products in different stevias today, like Zevia, the soda, et cetera. They're wonderful. This was back a while. And Scott Anderson told me, he said, what happens with your gut bacteria, your microbiome, actually affects your taste buds. I can't, I'm not explaining exactly like that. You got used to it or whatever. It
Mm-hmm.
changed my sense of taste.
Mm-hmm.
Then
That's so
kind of made
interesting.
sense to me. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
what else happened, and that's
Yeah.
we don't,
Well,
and
it is.
how it affects the brain, etc. Go ahead.
It is interesting to think, like, I have people a lot of, very often say, well, like, I don't really like kimchi, let's just say,
Yeah,
for instance. And yeah, I'm like, I love kimchi, and I've developed, like,
as
not
do I.
only a taste, but like a love for kimchi. But I don't care how healthy it is, if there's something that you've never had before and you taste it the first time, it doesn't register, right? It, like, the body, the signal that goes to the brain is like, what is that? It takes a few times before it's like, oh, I recognize that and I know how to deal with that. And so whenever you're trying something new, I tell people, like, put it in something you love. You know, take, if say you want to add fermented foods to your diet, take a teaspoon of sauerkraut, a teaspoon of kimchi, mince it up, and put it in your bowl of salsa. Right now, all of a sudden, it's
Yeah.
just the slightest little introduction. You're getting the benefits of the fermented food. You're loving your salsa, and maybe it changed the taste just the smallest amount. And the next time you add a little more, and the next time you add a little more, and maybe, eventually you're just eating the kimchi or the sauerkraut and the salsa separately.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter what it is. It could be something fermented. It could be kale. It could be broccoli. It could be green beans. I think that's always the way to go. Start small. Put it in something you know
Yeah.
love.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
love kimchi. And as an aside, very quickly, there was a filmmaker that was filming a movie called The Worst Christmas Ever. And it's out. It's available. I'm not on Tubi or whatever. It's an interesting movie. And he got in touch with me. I had interviewed him. His dad was supposed to come in to play this minimal, like a one-line role in the movie, and he couldn't get here. And he asked me, he said, "Can you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Whatever. Just tell me what you want." He said, "Well, bring some whatever you like to snack on, whatever your favorite snack is, and bring it." And he said, like potato chips or whatever. I said, "Johnny, actually," I said, "I like to get a jar of kimchi and eat it with chopsticks, and that's what I walk around and eat." He said, "Dude, that would be great. That would be great." So actually, again, not to belabor it, but in the film, there's one. Again, I have one line, and they show me with the chopsticks and the kimchi, and it was just like, that's interesting.
Well,
And I love it. Not every, and I know others that can't even stand the smell of it.
so, it's interesting because my husband is one of those can't even stand the smell of it. And yet, if I take a can of artichoke hearts and put them in a food processor with a cup of kimchi and make that the seasoning and
Yeah.
whip it all together and a tablespoon of avocado mayo, oh, I mean, he'll just down that. Like, oh, this is delicious. So that's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
not everything is at its best for your unique palate when it's on its own. And, but, that's my
That's the
job,
beauty of it,
right?
right?
Cookbook. But
That's the beauty of it. Everybody, if there was only one, if everybody liked one kind of food, that's all that would be, is the one kind of food. And that's the beauty of it. I'm talking with Terry Walters, terrywalters.net. One more quick comment about the pak dong. And that recipe is in your new book, Nourish, Plant-Based Recipes to Feed Body, Mind, and Soul. I remember first time I made it, I probably shared this with you, but I'm watching for it. I'm a nervous, I don't know, fermenter. I always want to make sure I did it right. Sometimes I'm not paying as much attention, not doing it too quick, whatever, distracted. And I remember seeing the bubbles a couple of days later when it was actually fermenting. And I was like, I don't know if do you remember have you ever seen the original Frankenstein? Anyhow, Colin Clive is the scientist. He's Dr. Colin Clive, and there's a point when the monster moves its fingers or something like that, and the line is great. He said, "It's alive! It's alive!" And I screamed out, "It's alive! It's alive!" And of course, Bun didn't know what was going on, came to check on me. But it's wonderful seeing that. And you do a
it's
lot.
wonderful, but I think it's also scary for a lot of people. And so in this book, it was really important to me to take the scare factor away, and really just, talk about why these fermented foods are so important. I mean, if you go to a grocery store and buy fermented foods, it's outrageously expensive. And they really cost pennies to make.
Yeah.
You can make an
Great point.
entire, bottle of or two of sauerkraut with a big organic cabbage that you get for $1, and so I've really tried in this to, give the guidelines to take away the fear factor, and really talk people through what to look for, because you know what, we're cultivating the bacteria that's naturally on this produce. And sometimes there's bad bacteria. Sometimes
Sure.
we end up cultivating bacteria that's in our environment. Like it doesn't always go right, but 9 times out of 10, it does. And you don't need any special equipment, a bottle,
Yeah.
and that's really it. And it can all be done on your counter, and you don't have to make a massive quantity. You can do a small quantity. And so, that was really important to me. There are, I don't know, 18, 20, 16 fermentation recipes here. And because we need it year round, right? So like someone's like, well, I eat yogurt, which is awesome. Or I eat sauerkraut, which is awesome. Like it's just important to eat it every day. And I don't know about you, but like I just don't want the same thing every single
Yeah.
day of the year. So having some options, to me is super important.
Yeah. And you've got beautiful options, by the way. And that carrot ginger kraut is another uh, favorite of mine.
Yeah.
My
That one's a
favorite.
hard one for even for me. Like that's a good example because it only takes like 24 hours because the carrots are so high in sugar that it can over ferment quickly. So you have to really keep an eye on it.
Yeah, something can actually over ferment. I know, I know it can, but they're wonderful. And again, the health benefits, but the taste, just for the taste is wonderful. And then when you love the taste of something and know that it's really good for you, to me, that's the pinnacle. Let's talk about availability of your new book.
That's how I feel about all the desserts in this book. Right? There's no gluten, there's no refined sugar. We're using flours like teff, which is super high in protein. Like I love making these desserts because I'll eat them for breakfast or lunch. Like they're high
Okay.
protein,
Yeah.
great fats. Like, yeah, that's how I feel. There should be no
And,
no.
and we say, yeah, we say about high protein. I was talking to someone earlier again, being vegetarian now, vegan for 20 some years, but vegetarian for 52 years. I'm still stunned when people say, so where do you
Every
get
day.
your protein? It's like,
Yeah.
and I again, and I was saying earlier, I understand in the early days, I understand that my mom was concerned that I don't know, I was going to get sick and die or something because I wasn't eating meat. It was very unpopular, especially for a boy back then. Yet it's 50. So I got that in the early days,
Mhm.
in the early 70s, and that people saying it. Now I'm standing in front of you. I'm in my 70th year. I've done this for 52 years. And you're really asking me, where do I get my protein?
I
As-
know.
But again, within the desserts and the different flours like teff, loaded with protein and
Yeah,
delicious.
but I do think that to follow a plant-based diet, like my feeling is that we all need more plants, right?
Yeah.
So, whether you buy the book and live exclusively on these recipes or just add them to whatever else you're eating, I think you benefit. But it
I,
is not easy to follow for a lot of people to follow a fully plant-based diet because, you know, we don't when we're in school we do not learn what we need for good nutrition. We don't learn, well, we need to get B12, we need to get right, and that's very hard to get if you're vegetarian. And so
yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
gotta be careful.
that's why in my books it feels almost irresponsible not to give all that information. I want people to have that information. So a vegetarian diet of pasta and salad isn't going to get you
It's good.
nearly as
Yeah.
far as like a nice clean food diet that includes a wealth of produce and legumes and grains and nutrients.
No, it's a really good point because when I will say people, there's a lot of people, obviously not everybody, but that assume if you're vegan that it's a healthy diet, that you're healthy because being vegan. And my explanation is I could eat potato chips and drink certain beers that I check out on barnivore.com to make sure they're and that the chips are vegetable, etc. That's not a healthy diet. It might be fun for a couple of days, potato chips and beer. It would be vegan, but it's not a healthy diet.
Right.
And with all the processed foods out there, and again, I love seeing them. I love that people are using them for a number of environmental cruelty issues, etc. those are highly processed foods. Yeah, they're delicious. I think it's great to use them once in a while. I think it's okay to use them once in a while. Once in a while is key for me. It doesn't
Right.
mean you have to be conscious or about your food choices and if you want to eat a healthy diet. And again,
Mhm.
your recipes, all your recipes and all your cookbooks, and now Nourish, availability of Nourish, the new book.
Um, Mostly on my website, terrywalters.net. That's it, my friend.
Yeah,
terrywalters.net.
I always like to say I've got the links up at louisfreeshow.com, wfmj.com, louisfree.com, wherever the young techies put them. Nonetheless, just go directly to terrywalters.net. And I also want to say, of course, gift one for yourself. You know someone that needs or would love and enjoy your book. I think it's wonderful for a gift because you're giving them, it's a beautiful book with all these recipes, and it's a gift of, if they make them, if they use them, health for them, a soul
Yep.
satisfying.
Right.
What better gift?
Yeah, and people are telling me, especially with this book, that they're not only are they loving cooking from it, but they are taking it to bed with them, which is, the
That's
greatest compliment an author can have is for a cookbook, like that people are really reading it and getting so much information. Honestly, like I think my favorite part of the book is the favorites section where I go into all my favorite ingredients because, and not only why they're my favorites, but like what I look for when I'm looking for a virgin coconut oil or salt, how to make these choices when you're standing in the grocery store or looking online. What are the health benefits of these foods? What to look for when you're shopping, and even brands. I go right down to brands. And I love that section and the tools that I use and why I use them. And I just think it's super, super helpful. And of course, this is the fourth book, I always write my own index because I go through every single page and I take every main ingredient and I list it in the index. So like if you're wondering about kale, you can go, or you look in your refrigerator and all you have is a head of kale. You can go to the back, look up kale. You can see the page that talks about kale. You can see the recipes that use it, right? And you can make a choice from there. So I always think, like, I want people to use my book from the back to the front. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And wash that kale, regardless of whether it says triple wash when you buy it. Bill Marler is a frequent guest, and he's attorney Bill Marler. He's a food safety lawyer. He did the Jack in the Box case years ago. There's a Netflix film coming out about him this year. He teases me a lot. But I asked him once he said, I don't care if it says it's washed 10 times, wash it. So I
Wash
call it
it.
Marlerizing. You Marlerize all your produce. And he also said to me, Terry Walters, Louis, normal people don't eat kale. Well, yes, they do. He teases me again in a lighthearted way, and I love kale, and your recipes again are
But you
fantastic.
know what?
Explain it to
Kale's
me.
not the only way. Like, let's look, there are 5 tastes, and bitter is the most important. And that's what we get from our greens. And kale is not the only way to get all of the minerals and the calcium and the iron that we need from our greens. It could be broccoli, it could be romaine lettuce, it could be watercress, leeks, any of the cabbages, bok choy, napa. So collard greens. So kale isn't the only option. And
Sure.
that's, I want people to understand that there are a lot of ways to get from where you are to where you want to be. And nothing is absolute, right? You don't have to do any of it, but it's in your best interest to just start.
Start.
And yeah, just start and bringing more plant-based recipes in. And I've been saying this on the show, I think um, for all 14 years, which is if you picked one recipe a week and just try one new thing, at the end of the year, if you only liked half of them, you'd have 26 new plant-based recipes in your diet. And that's amazing. And that's a slow transition that's more sustainable. And, it's not saying, okay, what's going to replace my steak? You don't have to replace your steak with a kale steak, right? You
That
just
might be, yeah.
start bringing in other foods and let the steak move to a healthier place in the mix. And, instead of having animal protein 3 times a week, maybe you can bring in some plant-based recipes and reduce it to 1 time a week. Or maybe you want to get rid of it altogether, or maybe it works really well in your body, which is good. But let's just look at the whole picture and see what we can bring in to maximize our ability for good health.
Terry Walters, I know that I've come to think of things differently. When I stopped eating flesh, I stopped eating flesh. That was it. I remember the day, I know the date, etc. Vegan, when I went vegan, I don't remember the day, but when I made the decision, that was it. There was no, I'll ease into it or whatever. So I was a bit, I'm embarrassed to say, critical about meatless month. Not critical. It's just like, oh, if you're going to do it, do it. I understand it much better now. Not everybody wants to do it like that, and they make them have a meatless, whatever it is. They do it for a week, whatever. But then which is wonderful, even one day a week. However, it
Well,
doesn't.
I mean, I think that rigidity, that kind of rigidity, um, even though I tend to think that judgment and rigidity don't really serve us and don't belong in our food
I
system,
agree.
they can help you stay the course, right? So if you have a goal, sometimes we need to be like hold on really tight in order to stay the course until it is habitual, right?
It worked for me. That
Yeah,
worked. It worked for me. It's not for everybody.
yeah,
It's just the
yeah,
rigidity. If you want to do it, you do it. Make the commitment, go for it. Get your cookbook, Nourish, any and all of your cookbooks, because it's a great place to learn. And again, your recipes. There are, I'm sure, all types of cuisines, etc. Vegan recipes out there that you've got to order a spice from. You can't find it. You've got to kind of restock or add to your what you have in the kitchen, and that can turn off people, or too much. What do I want to say? Too many processes to get it. You got to do this. You got to do it. And I enjoy some of those, yet not everybody does. And I wouldn't want to do that every day. I wouldn't want to cook that all the time. And
yeah.
yours are very accessible. And you, like you say, you explain everything. You talk about tahini. I've got to tell you, I not too long ago found black tahini, organic black tahini, which I have just come in love with. You open the jar and it looks like motor oil.
Yeah.
And if you get it on your fingers, or which I do, I'm a stainer. I get it on my clothes, whatever, and it's tough to get it. Yeah, yet I love it. Black
Yeah.
organic tahini, and try the company Kavala or something like that. But tahinis, a lot of people haven't used tahini, and when you get into it, if you get into it, you'll love it. I use tahini on a lot of things that recipes don't call for.
Yeah, and a great source of calcium actually, and great fats. And yeah, I love tahini too. Sometimes um, I buy tahini and it just doesn't agree with me. And what I found is that if you get a tahini, for those who don't know, tahini is just sesame paste. It's
Yeah,
like peanut butter, but made out of sesame seeds. And so it's a great source of fat, great energy, great protein, and great calcium. And but anytime you break a seed, it starts to go rancid, right? And any nut or seed, as soon as you break it, it starts to go rancid. And what I have found really great with tahini is there either a light or a dark roast, any roasted tahini, and it just helps it be shelf stable and preserve it. It's a little easier for me to digest. Yeah, I love tahini. I use it quite a bit, mixed with a
that's
little
why.
lemon juice, a little water, maybe a little miso, drizzle it on absolutely anything.
Anything, everything, right? Terry Walters, terrywalters.net. I'm talking with Terry Walters, terrywalters.net. I love how you always, you have the seasons you have it broken up into seasons: spring, summer, fall, winter. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I have well, I don't know. I live in New England, so I'm looking. There's snow outside today,
Yes.
and it'll probably be gone by the weekend. I used to believe that New England had 4 seasons, and sometimes it feels like there's a new season every day.
Well,
Uh,
excuse me, Terry, they say in Ohio, you have all 4 seasons in one week, and
yeah,
that's happening more frequently.
exactly.
It's cold. You have snow a couple of days later, it's 60 degrees. It's bizarre.
It is absolutely bizarre. Um, but the food that's growing around us gives us what we need to maintain balance with the seasons. So, in the spring, we get all the baby greens that are coming up and they're bitter, and we eat them when they're young and they're super cleansing, and they, help us transition to the warmer weather, lighten up. They help reestablish good flora. And in the summer, those plants grow up, and we pick the fruits, and they're higher in water, and that keeps us cool. And then those plants in the fall, they die back and send all of their nutrition down into the roots, and we harvest the roots, which are super strengthening and boost our immune system. And so it goes on and on like that. So by eating what grows around us, it helps us maintain with balance with our environment, but it also helps us um, ensure quality and freshness, right? And it's actually more affordable because what's in supply will be in greater demand. The price will go down, right? Because we have this supply in the fall of all these root vegetables and these winter squashes, right? And it's more likely that we can provide those locally grown. So now you have freshness, and you know exactly how it was grown and where it was grown and what was or was not put on it. And so it really helps. And most people tell me, I can't get my head around that, right? And I say that's why I did it for you. So all you have to do is open the book to the
That's right.
season.
That's right. To the season and go for it. Again, you
But
order
this
the book
book,
at terrywalters.net, terrywalters.net, and gift it. Gift it for
this
people. People are going to love this. It's so beautiful. I wonder,
I'm with you. But so this book, I just want to say also has this beautiful original artwork in between the seasons. And I don't know if you know that each
I want
season
the poem. Go
has
ahead.
a poem, has a
That's,
poem.
yeah, that's on my list to ask you. Tell me about the poem. I'm glad you mentioned it. I tell me about the poems, right? The poems with the book. They're
Well,
beautiful.
I think of this like as the pause between seasons. And I think that's like just a really great practice to just take a deep breath between seasons, to acknowledge the season is changing, to acknowledge your body is moving through the world in a different way. And so that's what like this little section is. And I've written, this is my fourth book, but I've never felt more vulnerable than publishing my own poetry.
But again, here the page you just opened. I'm going to show you. Here's my note, poem to talk about. Poems on here. Poem more vulnerable. You've never felt more
Yeah,
vulnerable.
I don't know. It's just, I write poetry for myself. I've never published it. I write recipes for everybody else. That's my profession. But I don't think of myself as a poet so much, but
You are.
I
Excuse me.
did write
You
the
are.
poems here.
Love the poems. I love the poems. Again, I'm not going to ask you to read the entire poem, but I love when you say, I if I protect my heart, I'm Mr. Walk in the woods. I see, I listen, I breathe, I taste. I love the season where I feel at home, and it's beautiful. Your poetry is beautiful. I'm really glad that you published it in this book, in your
Thank
new
you.
book.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's the process of writing a poem for you, Terry. Tell me about that.
Um, Usually the poem does not come to me when I sit, usually not anything I write does not come when I sit down to write, if that makes any sense at all. It comes to me when I'm walking in the woods. It comes to me when I'm driving in my car alone. I have the ideas come, and I always make sure I have a pad of paper and a pencil or a pen around me, somewhere so I can get to it and write the structure or whatever it is I'm thinking down. But usually they just come to me, and it's kind of the same with the recipe. Although, if I'm making a soup recipe, I've developed this technique of everything I want to put in the soup, all the vegetables, I create the recipe with all the vegetables and the stock and everything else, and I don't season it. And I take the pot of unseasoned soup, and I take all the spices and herbs that I'm considering adding to it, and I put them on the cutting board, and I take little cups, and I ladle some of the soup into the cup, and then I do pinch of this, pinch of that, and I taste it, and I'm like, it's not it. Okay, next one. Pour some soup, different combination of herbs and spices, taste it, and when I get to the one where I'm like, ooh, that's the one, then I season the whole pot and write it down. And then the next time I make it, I use those herbs and spices and write down all my measurements and make sure I have the right quantity.
And that's key, by the way. Write it down, because if you want to make it,
Write it
don't be
down.
like me. Don't just, yeah, and then think, what did I put in? By the way, as you go into the winter section of your book, this beautiful book, Terry Walters' Nourish, Plant-Based Recipes to Feed Body, Mind, and Soul. And you get it by going to Terry's website, terrywalters.net. You were talking about seasonal things. There's the pomegranate, the artwork for the pomegranate. Terry, I love pomegranates. I've thought about this because earlier in the year or after pomegranate season, it's like, oh, why can't we get them? They're gone. I really enjoy it. I love Cara oranges. They're in season for a while. I go
Mhm.
wild for them, and then I anticipate the next time or next season.
That's
Pomegranates, I found the palm wonderful pomegranates at a store recently, and they were $1 each, and they're, yeah, right. I mean, they referred to me as the pomegranate man because I wanted to load up before they went off sale. And
right.
I love them. They're so good for you. But I always have my pomegranate hands this time because, not to be gross, I get the arils out, and when I eat them, again, this might gross people out, with my hand. I reach in, I throw them back. And
Well,
the
I do
stains,
think
if you
that
haven't worked with pomegranates, they stain like everything.
so there's a really easy way to work with pomegranates and not spend the small fortune of buying them,
Oh, I don't buy
already
this. Yeah,
seeds out.
the arils out. Yeah.
So if you take the top and slice it off, just the top like 1/4 inch, you'll see that there's like a vein that runs down and throughout the whole pomegranate. And if you take your knife and you cut downward just to pierce the skin through where you see those veins, which is like the pith of you would see of an orange, just slice down, then you can stick your fingers in the top and just
Feel it down.
open the whole
Open up.
thing and then just brush the all those little aerials out.
You
And no,
I,
no muss, no muss, no fuss.
yeah, I have a friend that his method, he's Pakistani, and we were talking pomegranates once, and he quarters them, and then you kind of bend them out, and then you take like a not too heavy, the back of it, and bang on it, and
And
bang on it,
bang
or
it.
a big wooden spoon, and a lot of them fall out. You still have to pull some away. My
Every time I do
advice,
that method, my backsplash in my kitchen looks
right?
like
There's,
it
yeah.
was
Oh yeah.
painted
Yeah. Yeah.
red.
Yeah. And I kind of like the look. Not it,
No.
no one else does in my home. But the thing I would advise people to do, if you're doing that, if you're taking like the back of a knife or a heavy spoon or something, pay attention to what you're doing and focus. Because I came down on my thumb once. I wasn't, oh yeah. And it's like, yeah, you've got to pay attention. You've got to pay attention to be
Yeah,
present with what
the
you're
whole
doing.
idea with the pomegranate is to basically turn it inside out.
Yes.
It
Yeah,
will just come apart on its own and you can brush
wonderful.
those seeds out.
And they're
No
delicious. They're wonderful.
aggressive
And they're really good.
pounding.
And they're really good for you. And that's how I do it now. I don't, because I've got my own technique, and it works. It works for
Yeah.
me. Terry
I
Walters, and
just,
I
you
love
talked about the artwork, and I know some people can't see it,
beautiful. No,
the
that's
artwork, I love this artwork. Like this page looks like space to me with the pomegranate and the orange. And it was done by two local artists, Sarah and Megan Snow, twins. So pretty thrilled about
okay.
that. And there's photography throughout the book as well that we should let readers know about, which is um, another dear friend. Looks so beautiful.
Photography is beautiful. Yeah. And you're showing for listeners, you're showing the
That is
beautiful
the chickpea
photography.
flour crepe
Oh,
with
yeah.
figs and candied walnuts.
At Terry Walters Nourish, the book available from terrywalters.net, plant-based recipes to feed body, mind, and soul. It's a wonderful cookbook, a wonderful gift. And I've got to mention I call it the sweet potato pie that I thought is probably made. I was trying to keep track when we were really on a roll, when she was making one probably every week, maybe twice a week sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember.
What a wonderful, yes, still, what a wonderful, how you create the recipe still blows my mind. How you
Thank
put it
you.
all together.
At this
And
point, I think Bunny probably makes a better sweet potato pie than I do.
I doubt that. I doubt that. She's got it down though. I do have to say she's
Yeah.
got it. Believe me, she's got it down. And that recipe is fabulous. And some of the new recipes in the new book, Nourish, for people, again, to explore some of the recipes and find out. And I know I'm jumping all around the poetry
That's
for
okay.
winter. When you write, I won't read the whole, and maybe I could get you to read on the
Winter?
page you just had up with the pomegranate.
Sure.
Um, The Darkness of Winter. Do you want to read? Will you read the whole? It's not long.
No,
Do you
it's not
mind?
long. I'll read it.
Thank you.
The darkness of winter shines light on the power of food. As the winds whip, the pot simmers. As the mercury falls, the oven heats. As the windows frost, hot tea warms my core. As leaves are shed, roots keep us strong. As the outside sits quietly, inside we gather. In the heart of the home, around the table, sharing a meal, telling stories, giving thanks, bellies and hearts full, nourished.
It's beautiful. Terry Walters. And again, the name of the book is Nourish. When you said about making notes when you're doing the poems, you always have something to write on. For decades, I put notes on my hand. I write them on my hand, and people will frequently say, "Louis, let me give you a piece of paper to write that." And my response is, first, I have to remember I have a piece of paper. Secondly, I have to remember where that piece of paper is. This way, before I get in the shower at night, I check them off. Problem was with COVID, where you had to wash.
Wash your hands.
It took me a while to remember not the back of the left hand, not the back of the left hand, because it's like, oh no, what was written there? What was written there? But it's much better to have something to write on, believe me. If you can
Well, there have
remember
been
that you have
many.
those.
I remember the introductory essay from Clean Food. I had written the whole book and I didn't really know what to write in the front of it. And one night it kind of came to me in my sleep, and I got up and I was looking everywhere around my room, and I found a pen and I went into the bathroom and wrote that introductory essay on toilet paper.
Wow.
And then ever since then, I've kept a pad of paper next to my bed.
Yeah, yeah. And I do also. I just that doesn't always work for me. The pad by the bed does, because it's always there. But
Yeah.
just carrying them around, and
I don't tend to carry around, but there's one in the car, there's one by the bed. They're strategically placed so that I can remember what the heck I'm thinking.
I have to remember to look, and then I have to remember to do it. The cheesy cauliflower soup is.
That's so good
I
that you
know
brought
that
that one
is.
up,
Yeah.
because that one is made cheesy with nutritional yeast, which is a great plant-based source of B12, which is essential for red blood cell development for those following a strict vegan diet. So it's cheesy, it's nutritious, it's super easy, right? Like, I mean, everything in this book, dump and stir. You put it all in the pot, you bring it to a boil. When it's cooked, you take a little handheld emulsifier and go zhuzh, 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 and
Zhuzh,
it's
zhuzh,
done.
done.
Zhuzh, zhuzh, zhuzh. That's the technical term.
When you again, the nutritional yeast, which you love, I love, I've used it for years. When people say something about it, I said it's called nutritional yeast. It's not just yeast. It's not yeast. It's nutritional. Hence, it's nutritional. It's good for you. And the
Isn't
flavors,
that
it's
funny?
amazing. Yeah.
Isn't it funny how the people that like you and I have to defend that we're eating food because we're so
Right.
alternative for eating food that's healthy? And when I go to the grocery store, like what I see in so many carts, all the junk food, but that's considered normal.
Yeah.
It's
Isn't that
always
odd?
struck me.
Yeah. Isn't that odd? I remember there was a friend of mine from out of town, and wanted to go shopping before they went back. And we're at a store, and they had the meat rack where the packaged meats, or I said, look at how do people buy that with all the blood? I mean, you can see the blood. This person, again, a smart person, my age, said, I never thought about it like that. I never thought about that being blood. And I get that. It wasn't that they're not ignorant, just never, because of culture, whatever, how they're raised, never thought about
Mhm.
the blood in those packages.
Mhm.
That's what I see when I see it. This person did not. And you're right, on a lot of junk food, the sodas, everything. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't, yeah,
Well, I
sugar.
think there's something to be said for the fact that we just don't take time to think. And it's, we have so much stress in this life. We have so many other pressures. And by the time you get to the grocery store, you're on autopilot. You don't want to spend a lot of time there.
I do.
Yeah, I do
I
too,
love
but
shopping.
occupational hazard. But
For you, for me,
a
it's just,
lot,
yeah,
but a lot of people are, and to no fault of their own, but like, you get out of work, you go to the grocery store, you got to get dinner on the table.
yeah.
Your goal is not to linger. Your goal is to buy what that you can make, that's, doing the best you can do, and get out of there. And it was so many times people have said, I don't know where to get this. Oh, well, this
Yeah,
ingredient, this daikon radish, has actually been in your produce department forever. You've just never looked at it. And
yeah,
so,
good point.
and and
Daikon.
I fall, that happens to me all the time. I look right by certain things. So, my goal is just to open up some options for people, to help them bring in these plant-based foods, to make them easy and delicious. When I'm making a recipe, if I am halfway through the recipe and I look around the kitchen and there are too many pots and pans out, I scratch the whole thing and start over. I don't even want to spend the time cooking anymore, but I do want really good, nourishing food that I can sit down, that is quick, easy to make, that my family likes, and I can spend more time sitting and enjoying the meal than preparing or cleaning up.
And for some, to share those, like you say, with your family, et cetera, is a beautiful thing. As I keep saying, I love to cook. To me, it's, I like to take time with it. It's more, probably shouldn't use the word meditative, but I know it's good for my head
Hmm.
because I'm focused. And again, with the knives, et cetera, I've got to stay focused.
Hmm.
And I know it's good for me. It's a good from for my brain. It's good for my brain.
Yeah.
Good I'd even say for my soul, to be
Hmm.
there cooking, preparing something that, yeah, I get it, only I'm going to eat. Nonetheless, the process for me is I wouldn't want to like pick it up. I might,
Sometimes I want to,
well,
I'll admit, sometimes I want to just pick it up. I do, because I'm human too.
sure.
But, and that, I think that's the biggest difference between this book and all the previous, is that each one of these recipes is a meal. I just do not want to be like putting two or three things together. I want to make one effort and put it on the table. So instead of having, vegetables and legumes, this is, large plates, small plates, and then, everything else. Soups.
Yeah. Again, that cheesy cauliflower, just go back for a minute. I
Hmm.
had some, and I should have asked where he got it. He had some uh, purple and green cauliflower, and I don't know how he said, do you want these? Because I don't know what to do with them. I said, I won't use the expletive. I said, it's cauliflower. It's irrelevant what you're getting different, whatever. It's cauliflower.
But have you
Steam
ever
them,
bought the
boil
green beans that are purple and then you steam them or saute them, and when you cook them, they're no longer purple? It's so sad.
Yeah, yeah, because I love the cauliflower. I love the colorful, the orange, and again, it's cauliflower. What
I mean, in some
likes
of the
cauliflower
smoothies,
and didn't, but it was fine. He gave them to me, which was great.
some of the smoothies in the book, I talk about using cauliflower, because you first of all, you can't just freeze it. You have to blanch it and kill any bacteria or anything. But if you cut it up, pour hot water over it, drain it, and then throw it in a bag and freeze it, then you can take it out, and instead of using, dairy to make your smoothie creamy and rich, you can add, a couple of florets of frozen cauliflower,
Yeah,
and all of a sudden you're adding this amazing nutrition to a
yeah.
smoothie. And it's so easy.
Yeah,
and so much sugar.
yeah, that's right. That's right. The rice pudding with ginger and blood orange, by the way. Again,
Oh, I mean,
fantastic.
flavors that I love, but that recipe, one of the things I love about it is that I tend to have leftover rice. I tend to have leftover everything because I like to cook once and eat several times, so I make a lot. And so if I make a big pot of rice, I might serve it with, a stir fry one night. And then the next day, I might saute some vegetables and reheat the rice and press it into a patty. And then the last day, I've got a little rice left. So to be able to saute it with a little bit of rice milk and some orange and turn it into a pudding is amazing. But you know what? It's not just a time saver. When you cook whole grains and you cool them, they develop resistant starches. And resistant starches, our bodies don't digest, but our gut bacteria do. So they
Interesting.
actually they are prebiotics that feed the good beneficial bacteria in our microbiome. So leftovers really do have value. And when you reheat that rice, you don't destroy those resistant starches. Once you cook it and cool it, they're there. So
Not-
to have that leftover rice that's full of those great prebiotics and then turn it into really a rice pudding that cooks up in 10 minutes.
And this
Awesome.
is, I love this with the blood oranges. Of course, you can use regular oranges also, as you write in your book, Nourish. But when you write, if you asked my girls what recipe they remember loving most from childhood, it would be rice pudding.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that you put those personal things in the book.
Well, you know what? In my family, like my daughters are like, how come Sarah got, credited for that recipe? Or Sarah got credited for testing
Yeah,
recipes and I didn't. And I've been here testing all of that, but they're
which is
part of
good.
the process. And, part of what I bring to writing books is that I'm a mom.
Yeah.
And I am feeding a whole family, and everybody has different tastes. My family's not different than anybody else's, right?
Yeah.
Everyone is different needs, different tastes. They want something different, and I really hope that I've provided that with this book.
Well, I know you do with all your books, and the new one, Nourish. Again, I love it. I love how the way you designed it, the art, the poems, of course, and it lays flat, so you don't have to struggle
Yeah,
with it or
you're
put a
not
weight on it
you're
or
not with
something
your
or
hands
bend it
filthy
back.
trying to flip the page back and find where you were.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that. One of the many things I love about your book, Nourish. Again, terrywalters.net, terrywalters.net. I want to say good morning to Ada and of course my dear friend Maggie, Vera, and others that are out there joining us. And again, we'll be up in podcasts or whatever it's called, a YouTube video, whatever, a little bit later. A little bit late. I was going to say this morning, a little bit early this afternoon. I keep talking about that creative process and your family, the input from your family. Like you were saying, gets credited, one daughter gets
Mhm.
credited. What's that? I ask you this every time about the creative process.
I
And
know.
I've asked you numerous times this morning already, and I'm going to ask you again because it's
Well,
beautiful.
it's just interesting because once you start writing, everybody has an idea about what you should write and what kind of a
Of
cookbook it
course,
should be.
of
and
course.
and it always makes me think I must not be a writer because I can't write what somebody else tells me to. And so I
Right.
can only write from my experience. And my family is intimately part of that experience, having a big vegetable garden in the backyard. And I'll never forget like the time where my youngest planted a whole bed of arugula. She was so excited. I'm like, have you ever had arugula? No, but I'm gonna, she was so excited. And then
I love arugula.
homegrown arugula can have some kick to it. So she harvested that first harvest, and we made a big salad, and she took one bite and she ate it. And I thought,
You
and
got it,
and
right?
you know what the next thing she said was, next year I'm planting green beans. And I thought, that's it. That right there. It's not about blindly liking everything and doing for your best nutrition. It's about being on a journey and figuring it out. But like you can't figure it out unless you engage in the journey. And so for me, it's been such an honor to share this with my family, and they keep me going and thinking and asking questions and making choices listening to my own body, listening to theirs. And that goes into everything that we do.
Yeah. And they get to taste the recipes, which would be if I wish I lived close.
You
Because
know
that
that
would be a taste.
when the kids are at school, and they're gone now, they're grown. But when the kids were in school, if I was testing recipes during the day, if they came home and I said, "Oh my God, I made the most amazing thing, you have to taste it," they'd be like, I don't know.
That's
I'm
great.
not,
Yeah.
that looks really nice, but I'm just not in the mood right now.
Yeah.
But if I made something that I thought was awful and I threw it in the garbage, they'd be like, "What did you make?" I'm like, "Oh, it was a total fail. It's in the garbage." They would literally go into the garbage and get it out.
Yeah. To try
And then
it.
they'd be like,
Yeah.
"Mom, this is no good." And I'm like, "I told you."
That's why it was in the garbage, right, Terry? That's what what I would, if I were your neighbor, and you asked, well, what did you think of it? So I'm not sure. Can I get some more before I commit? Can I get just another
when I
vat full of the cheesy cauliflower soup?
when
Just
I'm
not
recipe
sure.
testing, because I make these recipes once, twice, and then I teach them. So that's another test. But before they actually go in the book, I test everything.
Sure.
And some I do myself, and some I ask, non-chefs to test just to make sure everything works well for anybody.
Yeah, that you can make.
And
Yeah, that's a good point too.
yeah, so there's always extra food. It feels really wasteful. So I post it on my Facebook page, and next thing you know, all my neighbors, "I'll take that soup. Yep, I'll take
I'll
that
take that. Yeah,
Spanish inspired chickpeas. I'll take an extra bottle of kimchi."
no kidding.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
you
goes
gotta.
out into the stratosphere and nourishes my whole neighborhood.
Terry Walters, that where do you think that comes from? And I know again, professionally and personally, I know you're very warm, you're very loving and giving. Uh, that's not always the case with people. And I want to go into a whole commentary and whether they write cookbook, whatever. And I've asked you this, where do you think that comes from in Terry Walters? A desire to help, to heal, to love, to share.
Um, That's a good question. A lot of this journey with food specifically, um, I shared with my mom. She was healing my dad, when my dad had a heart attack, the doctor said, cook from this cookbook, and it had more sugar, more animal protein, more dairy than they were
Unbelievable.
already eating. And so she didn't know what to do. And at that time, knowing that heart disease was in my family, I was starting to realize that I was making choices as well, and started to teach myself how to cook. And I mean, let's be honest, like back in the day,
That's
the healthy cookbooks, in quotes, you know, they were knowledgeable and they were lovely and they were few and far between, and most things tasted like cardboard.
yeah.
Um,
Oh,
and
I
so
remember.
yeah, and so this was, a journey. Like if if eating real food is what's best for me, there's got to be a way to make it delicious. And she and I really started this journey together. So I credit
Beautiful.
her a lot with that. But I think just family, community. I think it's all important. I mean, I've been teaching classes in my home, and now it's virtual. So to people all over the country,
Terry
um,
Walters done that. Go ahead.
yep, and you can find those classes online. But when we all come together around food, it everybody brings their wisdom, everybody brings perspective. We learn from each other, we connect, and
Mm.
there's far too little of that. And that is what really inspires me. And instead of that's why I called this book Nourish and not Clean Food. And granted, Clean Food was a great book and it
Oh,
made sense. And I
absolutely.
really wanted to talk about the food, but the food has power beyond what's on your plate. And that is Nourish. And that connection that we get when we share a meal, when we go to the same radio show for 14 years,
Thank you.
that is the
Me
power of
too.
food.
Yeah, it
That's
is
the
absolutely is. Couple more quick questions, if you don't mind. Thank you for sharing. That's beautiful. Again, it's more than doing it for yourself. your family and your mom and your dad. Again, you share it with the world from your heart. And I love that about you. The sourdough starter we talked about last time before, whatever, that has been alive for, I
12
can't
years
remember,
now.
right?
I
Yeah.
think
And you
12
do a lot
years.
with sourdough, and a lot of people, and you do classes about the
Mhm.
sourdough
Yeah, I do workshops. I think in the beginning
workshops.
of the pandemic, I must have taught a workshop, a sourdough workshop virtually every week for the first year of the pandemic. I mean, I've never made so much bread in my life. But there are a lot of people now making sourdough bread. And it's a good next question, because there's a whole section on fermentation in the book, and sourdough uses fermentation. It uses fermentation to basically pre-digest the wheat. And so the longer you ferment, you need the bread so that you develop this great the gluten, which gives it the structure, and then you ferment it, which eats the gluten and leaves the structure, and you end up with this really easy to digest, beautiful artisanal bread. And people always say your family must be so lucky to get all of your recipes and to know
They
how
are,
you're
I'm going to
cooking.
say,
And I don't think that they really feel like they are. But the one thing that they do express to me is how grateful they are that they eat fresh bread. There is always fresh bread in the house. We haven't bought a loaf of bread in probably, well, just 12 years.
that's,
So
yeah, probably. And I would understand that this is what they're used to. This is how they've grown up, especially the
yeah,
kids.
they're lucky.
They're very, I think they're very lucky. I
I
know
think
they're
they're
very
really lucky.
to be able to have that.
Yeah. But gluten doesn't always agree with me. And that's why I made this book gluten free. And yet, God bless. And yet, um, when I make, for instance, my sourdough pizza crust, which you get out of my sourdough bread making workshop, when you make that crust, I ferment that for 72 hours. So
Wow.
when I go out to eat pizza, I eat two pieces. I feel pregnant. My stomach is
Loaded.
so distended from the gluten and the wheat. And when I make my own with the fermented sourdough crust that ferments for 3 days,
It's
I could eat
wonderful.
a whole sheet pan with nothing. Delicious. I feel great.
Oh, good.
No stomach issues. It's pretty powerful.
When earlier this year, when I was trying to figure out what's wrong with me, uh, I mean, that's a joke. When I decided to uh, not the allergens, soy, corn, and
Wheat.
gluten. Yeah, gluten, and I think dairy. Those were the four, or whatever that. So those
Yep.
three, I said none for 30 days. Of course, your cookbooks were great for that, and I didn't have any. Obviously, it's not a food allergy, as I've learned. Nonetheless, it's interesting to see that, because some people, I know people that gluten doesn't do well from, and others I could eat as much gluten as need
Well,
be.
I mean, let's just give a little background on that, because I think it's confusing to a lot of people. And gluten is something that it's the protein of wheat, and it has changed over time. Like, that's really important to acknowledge, that how we grow wheat, we genetically modify it to have more gluten, 50% more gluten than we ever did before. And so wheat, not all wheat is created equally, and not all bread is created equally. And some people can struggle digesting gluten. Some people could have it could be the wheat. It could, there are lots of different components to it. But if you do a little test and take those out for 2 weeks and you start to feel better, some people say to me, well, I don't know if I'm allergic to this, or I don't know if I'm celiac. So, there's no point in doing it. But if you feel better, that right there is your answer. And it could be wheat, it could be soy. I mean, it could be all sorts of things. Every body is different. Every body has a unique constitution. And so listening to your body, I always talk about that nutritionist within. That's really the key.
Nutritionist within. And as you, at the back of your new book, Nourish, in the kitchen we gather, we listen, we taste, we grow, and we nourish body and soul. I just love you, Terry Walters. Again, at your website, you can get the book, Nourish, Plant-Based Recipes to Feed Body, Mind, and Soul. It's terrywalters.net. And I want to say again, I'm so appreciative of the relationship over the years. I've come to know you as the loving person that you are, and the heart-centered person that you are. And I want you to know how grateful I've been and continue to be.
Lou, say we're all just a reflection of each other, right? We're one. We just reflect. So
thank you. A minute about your website, terrywalters.net, or 2 minutes or 3.
Okay, yeah,
a
sure.
little bit about it.
There's you can buy Nourish on the website. Shipping is free, and there is time to get it for the holidays, and I fulfill all the orders.
Shipping is free.
Shipping is free.
Where do you hear that?
I fulfill all the orders. So if you want it signed to somebody, you can just put in the little note at checkout, sign it to me or sign it to whomever. And one of the things that we did that was really fun, and as a result of printing locally, is we printed these great bookmarks. And so everybody gets some bookmarks as well. And so the reason we did this is because when you print on the form, it's called the cover, there's extra paper. So rather than trim and throw it away, we trimmed and printed these bookmarks, so there was no waste. So you'll get those too. And then there's also classes on the website. And although nothing's scheduled in the new year, so if there's something that you're interested in, you just write and I schedule a class for you.
But I know you, Terry Walters. There will be scheduled.
There will be lots of classes.
I love the fact that there's no extra charge for shipping, and that you will autograph the book. What a wonderful gift to give someone an autographed copy of Nourish. Again, no shipping charges, that's unheard of. I'll just say.
Actually, it's the only way, I think. But it is what it is.
Because it can add so much. And again, there's an expense to that somehow you're handling it. That's wonderful. So gift it. Get it for yourself and gift it. What a beautiful gift. Again, you can get an autograph. What a beautiful gift. No shipping charges. And you're giving something that will be wonderful for people, the different recipes, to try them. Nourish. It will nourish them. Body and soul, right?
Mind and soul.
Terry, thank you so much.
Thanks,
we'll do it again. Thanks.
Thank you.
And thanks for dealing with my madness and my chaos. I love Terry.
I love it. That's why I come.
For the madness and the chaos.